Now, I call upon the Right Honourable Jacob Rees-Mogg, ex-librarian, Trinity College, Conservative MP for North East Somerset, to close the whole debate.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be speaking in this debate, and I congratulate you on bringing everybody back, and I congratulate the Honourable Lady on reminding people of the virtues of being able to cough. I think some of the coughs may have had a greater political significance than others. But I also want to congratulate the speakers on both sides, the Honourable Lady from Regent's Park and my honourable friend, the Treasurer Member for Corpus Christi College, who spoke so brilliantly and fluently and showed the Oxford Union, both of them, at its best and at its finest. And to speak today in favour of Her Majesty's government is, I think, one of the easiest challenges faced before us. Because when you look at the opposition to Her Majesty's government, Disraeli's phrase of exhausted volcanoes would be unduly flattering. What we have had is not any exhausted volcano, not even the reheated speeches of the 1970s. We have had a fantasy land, a rose-tinted spectacle, history lesson of what happened before, and a representation of what is going on now that bears no relation to reality. So let's just look a bit at the history lesson. So we heard what a marvellous socialist government there was before the Tories came in 2010, that hallowed age when everything was fine, before we were expelled from the Garden of Eden. Well, the problem is that before we were expelled from the Garden of Eden, they ran out of money. They even had the courtesy to leave a note left by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury saying, there's no money left. So at least they had the decency to admit it then, even if now they look back and say, all was well. And that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen, with so much of what you have heard from the proposition today, is the socialists forget that you always run out of other people's money. On every occasion, whatever the government has done, there should always be more spending, whether it's on overseas aid or it's on the universal credit. There should always be more without ever thinking of where it comes from. It comes from hard-pressed taxpayers. The £20 uplift. I know the Oxford Union likes a cheap hackle, but we are all taxpayers on this bench here. I have no idea about the other side. I expect they do. But taxpayers do not have unlimited money. It was pointed out that we're at the highest level of taxation since 1945. That might just tell you something. There is no more money to get out of taxpayers. And we rightly spent £407 billion supporting the economy during the pandemic. And that was the right thing to do because it saved jobs. As my right honourable friend said, it saved millions of jobs, meaning that once the economy opened up again, and we were the first major economy to open up fully because of the vaccine programme, incidentally, that Sir Keir Starmer would not have had us join because he wanted to sign up to the European Medicines Agency approach, which delayed everything by months. So when we hear from the proposition that every party would have done the same, bunkum, balderdash, blithering bottiness, we have to stick to the facts. So the £407 billion protected jobs and protected the structures of the economy, the economy is now recovering with record levels of employment and with vacancies there for anybody who wants to get a job. This is a really important part of the economic recovery. But it's better than that, the reasons that you should have confidence in Her Majesty's government, because we are delivering on Global Britain. Global Britain is being turned from a slogan into a reality. I was at Brize Norton earlier today, and at Brize Norton I saw the brave men and women who flew in mission after mission to evacuate 15,000 people when they were being shot at. We should be so proud of what our armed services did to rescue us, yes, from something that was an American foreign policy decision, But the idea that the United Kingdom could have held Afghanistan without the Americans wishing to do it. Now, I sometimes get accused of being old-fashioned. I sometimes get accused of thinking back to my right honourable friend says he can't think why. I'm very grateful. Of harking back to our glory days. But I'm afraid my honourable friend from Scotland thinks that we should be as we were at the end of the 19th century, at the height of the Raj, that the writ of the British Empire should run across the globe. Sadly, that is not the case. And if the United States is unable to hold Kabul, he is extremely unreasonable to think that Her Majesty's government could have done it. So global Britain is about looking beyond the narrow European sphere. We had some comment about Erasmus, but touring is global. Touring means that you can go all over the globe. You don't have to limit yourself to the narrow European sphere. You can go global. And your illustrious president, I'm glad to say, is going global. Not, I believe, on the touring scheme, but he is going to be taking up a post as a postgraduate with a scholarship, hats off, in China next year. So the reality, yes, a round of applause. I think you should have more rounds of applause for your illustrious president. Global nature of what we are doing is important. My honourable friend, the Treasurer, raised the trade deal with Australia, something we could not do as members of the European Union, and AUKUS is of fundamental importance because AUKUS shows that we are willing to put our money where our mouth is for global security, recognising that the threats may be outside the narrow European sphere. So it is a global, outward-looking United Kingdom that has protected the economy during the ravages of COVID. And yes, of course, COVID is important. Yes, of course, COVID has held back activity, has held back us from doing what we wanted to do when we set out in our manifesto. And yes, I've seen the criticisms have come. But I ask you this, those of you who bore the brunt of it, you, ladies and gentlemen, you, the young, who were not going to be killed by COVID, but nonetheless had to put your lives on hold for 18 months because of your sacrifice for the betterment of the nation. Would you have wanted a Prime Minister who locked you up at the first opportunity, who was desperate to take control, who immediately wanted to clamp down, or one who quite rightly wanted to defend your liberty until it was proved that it had to be done otherwise? I think you want somebody who believes in your freedom, your liberty, your right to lead your life, and that is what he did. And I am sorry to say that the shocking death rates that we have had in this country are similar to those that we have had with all our similar comparator nations. And therefore, it's not incorrect, actually. You can look up the figures. The figures are printed in the Times every day. I would suggest you take out a subscription to this admirable, estimable daily paper, of which my illustrious father was once editor. So look in the Times if you want to learn the facts. Don't believe a Lib Dem briefing. It's bound to be wrong. It's axiomatic that it would be wrong. So I think we had a Prime Minister making the right choices for the country and the right choices for you. And yes, of course, you have to think, if you have no confidence in this government, you would have to have confidence in something else. It's not good enough to say that you would like a vacuum, you would like well, I suppose you're an anarchist, you could say that. Are there any anarchists here? I'll give way to any anarchist who is here, who wishes to intervene. No anarchist. Okay, there being no anarchist here, you have to prefer. You must prefer. It is your duty to prefer something else. So would you really want to have a Labour Party that doesn't actually like its own members? Because my honourable friend, the Treasurer, pointed out that Sir Keir Starmer, QC, failed in his attempt to get one change through in his change to the electoral rules for the leader of the Labour Party. What was that? He didn't want the members to have a vote. He didn't want the people who are willing to put their money where their mouth is and say that they support the Labour Party. They didn't like the Brexit vote because they thought the voters were stupid. They don't like their own party members because they think they might not vote for who they want, who the establishment candidate is. If you don't like your own members, if you don't like your own voters, you do not deserve to have their confidence. We have a government that has a clear message, a clear vision, a clear direction, a government that has one of the most charismatic leaders that this country has had in a generation. We have somebody who is working for the whole nation. And yes, you may tease about levelling up, but I want to see every part of our country being as successful as the most successful parts are already. We want to ensure that the places that were left behind, that were ignored, that had socialist MPs who never had anything to do with them, never bothered with them, and then were chucked out at the last election, are properly represented and receive their fair share of the cake. But this cake must be a bigger cake, not a cake that we shall all eat and have, but a cake that grows because we make the right economic choices. And this is about setting the economy free, removing unnecessary European regulation, ensuring that through economic growth the tax burden will decline, whilst at the same point looking after those who are most vulnerable and need our support. And that we have done. 650,000 people no longer in workless households than there were in 2010. And not being in a workless household is the fastest and surest route out of poverty. That is a crucial economic success. 10,000 more policemen, nearly 9,800 more policemen than there were at the election of 2019. A police and crime bill. Didn't you all laugh when we were told that the Labour Party was so tough on crime? Did you know that they voted against the police, crime and sentencing bill, increasing sentences? They know that that's not right because they voted against it at second reading. They made no proposal. This is... Mr. President, news has been made tonight at the Oxford Union Society because the Labour Party has announced a new policy that a bill that it opposed because it didn't like it has now said it likes it but it isn't tough enough. Have they put down any amendments to that effect? What amendments? No, they have not. We are the ones increasing sentences, employing more police. This is in the House of Commons. I won't... Yep. Oh, I'll give way to him.
The PCSC bill, the Labour Party put down an amendment that increased the minimum sentence for rape from 5 to 7 years. They voted against it.
Mr. President, we have the great authority in this room on this bill. The former Lord Chancellor himself, it was his bill. He was responsible for the bill, and he has pointed out that what we have just been told is false. They voted against the second reading, which would have meant there was no bill at all. So to say they wanted it to be tougher is really stretching the elastic of credulity beyond breaking point. So, we have a strong and clear and well-led government, a clear policy for making the economy better, a clear policy for global Britain, a clear policy for levelling up, and what are we opposed by? Nothing.
Yeah.